Today, I'm going to talk about cumulative hydrological impacts, forest disturbance thresholds, and hydrological sensitivities in forested landscape. I have specific focus on the Keto River watersheds. During past years, our forests are experiencing considerable and intensive changes. However, our understandings about how forest change may affect the water cycle remain insufficient. About 10,000 years ago, more than half of global landmass were covered by forests. However, in recent years, only 1/3 of global land are covered by forest. That means during a long time history, forest covers decreased. How about the continental differences? Over the past 13 years, we can see there are large areas of forest decrease in South America and Africa. However, in Asia and Europe, forest cover gains in those two continents. How about our North and Central America? Overall, there are very little changes in forest area in North and Central America, but this is not the case for British Columbia. Forests covers about 16% of BC's landmass and play an essential role in regulating hydrological process and functions. As you can see from the graph, timber harvesting is the dominant disturbance type in the BC interior. Since the year of 2000, mountain pine beetle infestation and wildfire become more prevalent due to climate. A large proportion of forests in British Columbia have been disturbed, and there will be more disturbance in the future due to climate change. Those disturbances interact with each other and can produce cumulative hydrological impacts, which are the combined effects of human and natural disturbance in the past and present. The forest disturbance in BC highlight a unique research opportunity to understand cumulative hydrological impacts, forest disturbance thresholds, and hydrological sensitivities. Now, we know how forest changes in British Columbia, and then how forest change may affect water cycle. At the stand level scale, forest disturbance can affect interception, transpiration, evaporation, and eventually affect stream flow. At the watershed scale, due to the interact of different types of forest disturbance, the evapotranspiration can be affected and consequently affect stream flow. Besides, forest disturbance may also affect groundwater and ground and surface water interactions at the watershed scale. During the past centuries, we have some understanding about how forest change may affect annual stream flow. Normally, deforestation or forest cover loss can increase annual stream flow, while forestation or forest cover gain may decrease annual stream flow. And we can also see there are some exceptions, as maybe forest cover gain can increase annual stream flow. So this raises my first research question, that is how forest change may affect the direction of annual stream flow. And we can also see here, even with 100% of forest cover loss, the change magnitude, the change proportion can vary from 0 to about 300%. This highlights my second research question, that is, what is the response intensity of annual stream flow to forest change? That is hydrological sensitivities. And those two graphs are all shows that the significant change after significant changes in annual stream flow after forest disturbance. So I would like to know if there is a critical point. That means once forest disturbance level reached or above, so that hydrological significant and cumulative hydrological impact could be detected. That is my third research question. That is, what is the forest disturbance threshold? For an individual watershed, local climate and vegetation change can affect can alter annual stream flow, that is, can alter hydrology. But among multiple watershed scale, due to the differences in hydrological response, and the differences might be caused by local climate, vegetation, and also watershed properties. So for my study, I would also like to evaluate how climate, vegetation, and the watershed properties affect the variations in hydrological response. Our group has a method which can help us to determine forest disturbance thresholds to quantify cumulative hydrological impacts and to quantify hydrological sensitivities. Here is an example of the framework. There are two important components of the method. The first is the long-term forest disturbance history. For my study, I used the cumulative equivalent clear-cut area that is CECA to represent forest disturbance level. The CECA considers not only the disturbed area, but also considers the vegetation regeneration after the disturbance. So the CECA is a dynamic indicator that considers both disturbed area and the forest regeneration. And secondly, for this method, I developed and used a hydrological response curve. This hydrological response curve removes the impact of climate variability so that the response of annual stream flow to forest disturbance can be showed in this hydrological response curve. From the hydrological response curve, we can see there is a near linear and initial relationship between forest disturbance and the impact of forest disturbance and accumulated stream flow. When forest disturbance gradually increases and reaches the threshold, there will be a breakpoint in the hydrological response curve. After that, the observed line may deviate from the predicted line. If the observed line is above the predicted line, that means forest disturbance increase stream flow. If the observed line is below the predicted line, that means forest disturbance can decrease the stream flow. In the post-threshold period, the annual changes in stream flow to forest disturbance can be quantified so that hydrological sensitivities can be calculated accordingly. So here I showed the three research questions of my study. The first is use the framework to determine the forest disturbance threshold. Once the threshold is determined, cumulative hydrological impacts and hydrological sensitivities can be quantified. And then I would like to introduce the selected watersheds in the Kettle River. I selected 6 watersheds in the Kettle River from the small size to the largest size. Two large kettle rivers are the international watersheds with the downstreams in the United States. This graph shows the forest disturbance level in the Kettle River watersheds. From the left graph, we can see a large proportions of Kettle River are affected by timber harvesting. After that, I summarized the affected area and disturbance proportions in watersheds. I found about 13% of watershed areas are affected by forest disturbance. Specifically, timber harvesting, that is logging, is the dominated disturbance type. And then I draw the CECA, that is forest disturbance level for every kettle watersheds. Here we can see in the trapping and waste kettle watershed, timber harvesting is the only disturbance type. And for grabby watersheds, we can see there are some proportions of forest are affected by Mount beetle after 2016. Normally, those watersheds have relative higher disturbance level of over 15% of CECA. And then I would like to use my example from my PhD thesis and the examples in Kettle River to understand and show the result of three key research questions. The first is about forest disturbance threshold. The forest disturbance threshold is defined as the critical disturbance level that significant hydrological impacts are detected once disturbance reaches what is above. Actually, there is a study that recommended a forest disturbance level on annual stream flow that is 20% of forest loss. But from this paper, the author mentioned that the 20% value is identified from visual interpretation from this graph, which means that the identification method is not a scientific inference. Since the publication of this paper, I found there are many studies used this value, the 20%, to help select watershed for studying purpose. But I didn't find many quantitative studies on this topic. And also from the standing paper, there is a large variations in disturbance threshold. Thresholds are likely to be watershed specific and are likely dependent on hydrological variables of interest. That means annual stream flow, high flow, and low flows may have different disturbance threshold. Due to the long scientific identification method and limited studies, there is a critical need to re-examine forest disturbance threshold. After applying the framework in 14.2 studying watersheds in British Columbia, I found forest disturbance thresholds vary from 7 to 15.2% of CECA with an average of 17%. This is equivalent to 8 to 15.2% of disturbed area with an average of 19%. From here, we can still see large variations in forest disturbance threshold. Then I would like to figure out what factors can explain those variations. And this graph just shows the forest disturbance thresholds for my studying area in BC interior. How about for the Kettle River watersheds? From here, I found disturbance thresholds on annual stream flow vary from 9 to 21% of CECA in Kettle River watersheds. And we found for the Kettle River and the Ferry, which is a large watershed, have higher disturbance threshold. But for a small watershed, there is Beryl watershed, creek watersheds. There is a tributary of Granby watersheds have the smallest disturbance area. And then I would like to figure out what climate factors may affect disturbance thresholds. Here, I found both interannual and intraannual climate exert critical controls on disturbance thresholds. First, I found if watersheds have higher snow proportions, those watersheds have lower disturbance threshold. And then I compared the average snow fractions in Kettle River and in other BC watersheds. I found the average of snow fractions of Kettle River is 49%, and this value is higher than the and the snow fractions in the Kettle River is higher compared to the snow fractions in 19 over 13.6 watersheds in other regions. And then I also found if the watersheds have a dry summer, those watersheds also have lower disturbance threshold. However, in our Kettle River watersheds, those 6 watersheds all belongs to the DFC watersheds. That means the cold climate with no dry season. This also shows the maximum precipitation point in June, and the maximum timing of temperature is in July. That means the water supply and energy damage are more matched at the interannual scale. And then I focused on the roles of ecosystem diversity and watershed properties in affecting the variation of disturbance threshold. I found watersheds with large watershed size may have lower disturbance threshold. We speculate that lower disturbance thresholds in large watersheds might be due to more amplified effects from a large numbers of tributaries, disturbed patches, or more forested fragmentation caused by disturbance. Not surprising, I found watersheds with higher retention capacity and more ecosystem diversity tend to have higher disturbance thresholds. Dr. Giles Hudson from our group estimates forest disturbance level in 17 watersheds in the central interior of BC. Here, I found more than half of forested landscapes in the central interior of British Columbia have already crossed the average disturbance thresholds on annual streamflow. This implies that one threshold fits all approaches are not suitable for the management for watershed management, and this also calls for attentions on our forest and on water, since large forested landscape have already crossed the threshold, and in the future there will be more cumulative forest disturbance. And then I also determined the thresholds on summer low flows. I found forest disturbance thresholds on summer low flows ranged from 8 to 52% of CECA. The left graph shows the distribution, the variation of thresholds on summer low flows in 20 BC watersheds, and the right table shows the thresholds on summer low flows in 3 Kettle River watersheds. From here, we can see in the Kettle River watersheds, the threshold on summer low flow vary from 11 to 24% of disturbed area, and vary from 10 to 23% of CECA in 3 Kettle River watersheds. if you can remember the values for annual stream flow, you may say that the threshold on summer low flow is quite close to the values for annual stream flow. And from the statistic analysis, the answer is yes. Here, I didn't find any significant differences between thresholds of threshold between annual stream flow and summer low flow. Having a closer look at the differences in every watershed, I found some watersheds have larger thresholds on annual stream flow, and some watersheds have larger values on summer low flow. Such variability of distributions contribute to the non-significant differences in thresholds between annual stream flow and summer low flow. Here, I also found for 3 Kettle River watersheds, the value of differences between annual stream flows and summer low flows are quite small. Then I found the factors that affecting thresholds on summer low flow are quite similar as the factors that affect the threshold on annual stream flow. I found if watersheds have more distinct dry summer than if in DAC watersheds, the thresholds are lower. And I also found if the watersheds have lower annual energy availability represented by higher snow fractions and lower dryness index, or watersheds with greater topography gradient, that is, watersheds with large elevation differences and large downslope, the downslope gradient may have lower disturbance thresholds. That means that both climate and the watershed properties also affect the thresholds on summer low flows. Then I would like to 3 case studies to show how forest change may affect cumulative hydrological impacts. The first example is in 4 large watersheds in the central and south interior. From here, we can see we construct the hydrological response curve in those 4 watersheds, and we found after the breakpoint, the observed lines are all above the predicted lines. That means after forest disturbance, annual stream flow increased. And then I applied the same hydrological response curve in 6 Kettle River watershed to evaluate the impact of cumulative hydrological disturbance on annual stream flow. I found the similar result. That is, after the threshold, in the post-threshold period, the observed line, there is the red lines, are all above the predicted lines. This suggests that cumulative forest disturbance increases annual stream flow in Kettle River watersheds. But this is not the case for summer low flow. After applying another hydrological response curve, there is a kind of hydrological response curve for a seasonal hydrological response curve for summer low flow. I found the observed lines are below the predicted lines. This suggests that cumulative forest disturbance decreases summer low flows in Kettle River watersheds. From this table, we can see that for all 6 watersheds, the annual stream flow increased after cumulative hydrological impact, but we only successfully quantified and determined the thresholds for summer low flow. And I found in the post-threshold period, summer low flows decreased in 3 watersheds. Compared the relative changes in annual stream flow and summer low flow, I found the changes in summer low flows are more considerable than the changes in annual stream flow. Finally, I would like to show some results about hydrological sensitivities to forest change. Hydrological sensitivities to forest change is defined as the response intensity of stream flow per unit of forest change. That means hydrological sensitivity is the dimensionless index. Every watershed may have different hydrological sensitivity due to the disturbance type, climate, and watershed properties. With the hydrological sensitivity, I did two things. I applied the different but similar equations to quantify the hydrological sensitivities for a global study and for a regional study. Because the CECA is can only be evaluated and to represent forest disturbance in British Columbia, and while the values are not available for global watersheds, I used the change proportions in forest cover in the global study and used the CECA to indicate forest disturbance in the BC study. Firstly, I did a global synthesis of hydrological sensitivities to deforestation and forestation. I collected data from 311 watersheds, 11 global watersheds. And this map shows the locations of the studying area. And first, I found forestation can produce higher disturbance, can produce higher hydrological sensitivities than deforestation. And then I compared the impact of climate. I found water limited watersheds have higher hydrological sensitivities in both deforestation and forestation group. And in the forestation group, I found with more mismatch of energy demand and water supply at the intra-annual scale, those watersheds have lower hydrological sensitivity. And then I compared the watershed, if I evaluate if watershed properties can affect hydrological sensitivity. Also, I found in the forestation group, large watersheds have higher hydrological sensitivity. And in the forestation group, I found watersheds with higher retention capacity have lower hydrological sensitivity. Then I found in the forestation group, hydrological responses to deforestation are more sensitive with pure forest types. And finally, I found soil types also affect hydrological sensitivity. Then I did studies in 14 studies in the BC interior. Since for every watershed, the lengths of post-threshold period are different. So I used the immediate hydrological sensitivities to make consistent comparison. Here, I found the immediate hydrological sensitivity vary from 0.5 to 3.6 with an average of 1.4. And I found more than about 81% of watersheds have greater hydrological sensitivities than the global average to the deforestation. So in my study, I successfully quantified immediate hydrological sensitivity, but if we have the value, I can know nothing. So I would like to know what factors can affect the variations, can lead the variations of hydrological sensitivities. Also, I found sorry. Also, I found climate, there is snow fractions plays the most important role in regulating hydrological sensitivity. In the threshold part, I found if watersheds have higher proportions of snowfall, those watersheds have lower disturbance thresholds. Here, I found if watersheds have higher snow proportions, those watersheds have higher sensitivities. This also implies that there is a negative relationship between disturbance thresholds and hydrological sensitivities. Besides, I found vegetation that can be represented by LAI also play significant impact on hydrological sensitivities. That is, for watersheds with higher leaf area index, those watersheds have lower hydrological sensitivity. And if watersheds are more topographic resilient, those watersheds also have lower disturbance thresholds. Besides, I found the interannual climate, there is the matrix of water supply and energy demand, and the interannual scale also affect hydrological sensitivity. That shows the watersheds with a dry summer have higher sensitivities. That means those watersheds are more sensitive to forest change, to forest disturbance. Besides, I evaluate the interactions between environmental factors and how those interactions may affect hydrological sensitivity. I found topography and climate have direct impact on hydrological sensitivity, while topography can directly affect climate, and climate can directly affect vegetation. This also suggests that topography can indirectly affect vegetation. Finally, I compared hydrological sensitivities of annual stream flow and of summer low flow. Different from the non-significant differences in threshold, I found there is a significant differences in immediate hydrological sensitivities between annual stream flows and the summer low flows. Then I also showed the hydrological sensitivities of annual stream flow and the summer low flows in Kettle River watersheds. Here we found that summer low flows have higher sensitivities than annual stream flow. That means 1% of forest disturbance may lead to more considerable impacts on summer low flow. Lastly, I would like to provide some final remark. So for my research, I successfully determined the disturbance thresholds on annual stream flow and on summer low flow. But I found there are large variations in threshold on both variables. This suggests that one threshold fits all approaches are not suitable for watershed management. Secondly, I found more than half of forested landscapes have already crossed the average threshold on annual stream flow in the central interiors of British Columbia. This calls for attentions on forest and water in those areas. Thirdly, I found hydrological sensitivities can be greatly affected by climate and topography. Finally, the used hydrological response curves are robust to determine disturbance thresholds and to quantify hydrological sensitivities. However, my research are only focused on annual stream flow and summer low flow. In the future, more research is needed on methods to help understand hydrological sensitivity and disturbance thresholds on peak flow or high flows. Thank you for your attention.